Noah Rosenfarb, it's great to see you. Welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Noah, we've known each other for a long time. You look fantastic, by the way. Just
Thank you.
absolutely wonderful. I know that's not the subject of our paper napkin, but I wanted to say that. You look great.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Trying my best.
Uh, so, you shared a napkin with me, and it says, Know your tax strategy. Why did you share that with
I think, I'm in the entrepreneurial community. I'm an entrepreneur myself. I'm a third generation CPA. And one of the things that's astonished me and kind of become my life purpose is helping entrepreneurs figure out what their tax strategy is. Because so many, they don't even know that they should think about it. They all have a business strategy, but they might not have a tax strategy. And when you look at the numbers, the government, whether, no matter where you are in the world, the government is taking a significant portion of your life's work from you on an annual basis. And eventually when you sell it at the end, they're going to take a chunk of that too. And then when you die, they might take another chunk. And so I just find that for entrepreneurs who are my heroes, the ones that are creating jobs and innovating, and, we should have a strategy to figure out how much of this do we want to keep.
One of the things that I think is really surprising about this um, is that as a CPA, you learned that you need to have a tax strategy, but that didn't come like it's not part of the education necessarily. This is something you learned later on. So, what was that revelation like? Was there an event, or was there something that happened that made
It's
you?
it's even earlier on than my education. So my parents were divorced, and we would spend, every other weekend with my dad. And on Sunday mornings, he'd cook us breakfast, and he would always, kind of talk shop. And one of the things that he would talk about were his clients and who was making money and how they made their money. And what I learned from a young age was that his real estate clients took advantage of the tax code. And so he always admired how the clients that were invested in real estate would pay very little in taxes. And that influenced me. So I knew that when I graduated from college, I wanted to become a landlord, and I wanted to take advantage of those same tax benefits that he had been talking about his clients taking advantage of.
So, is it your observation that there's something special about real estate entrepreneurs or real estate investors, or is it something about real estate, or is it something about the
Uh,
mindset? Like, where that,
you
like,
know, I'm,
what did
I'm
you
a
uncover?
US taxpayer. And so our US government incentivizes home ownership for everyone, but they also incentivize investments in real estate. So I think partly it's just the way the incentive system was set up in the US, and how did I see, one, entrepreneurs get an advantage over employees because employees have to pay tax on 100% of their earnings. Entrepreneurs get to pay all of their expenses before they have to pay tax on their net earnings. So the American system is certainly set up in a certain way to give advantages to entrepreneurs, to give advantages to real estate professionals. Um, but it influenced me to just think about what's my strategy going to be. And again, my strategy was, okay, I'll be a real estate guy because I could see how that works and how it would work into my life. And I happen to like real estate investing. And so it was a fit, but there's other strategies that people can take. And most of the entrepreneurs I talk to, I just get a blank stare in the face if I'm trying to talk about, like, well, what's your tax strategy? They have no idea. Make as much money as possible.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that a lot of people uh, take it for granted. And do you think it's because operating entrepreneurs, not just real estate entrepreneurs, but operating entrepreneurs are so concerned about survival at the early stages that taxes become a hey, if I'm paying taxes, well, that's because I'm making profit and I'm okay with that problem. Do you think it's that?
No, I don't. I think it's maybe sometimes I equate it to how people that might be 20 or 30 years older than us may have taken the advice of their doctor. People didn't really have as much education or maybe self-determination around their health historically, and they would just listen to what their doctor said. And then nowadays, people kind of do the research, they have their own philosophy about their health and their wellness. Well, I think we're still 30 years ago when it comes to accounting. People just rely on their accountant to tell them how much tax they should pay and what options are available to them if they want to pay less in taxes. And we just take their word for it. And so that's how it works.
One of the things that I think is interesting about the word, it's not when you said the napkin has know your tax strategy, not know how much taxes you need to pay. I mean, those are different things. You're talking about tax strategy being like a business strategy that you need to plan for, you need to organize against, you need to have tactics and tools to implement. I think that word is intentional in your napkin, right? It's
Yeah.
strategy, right?
Yeah.
So, what do you mean for people listening? It's like, oh, well, yeah, I have a tax plan. I follow my tax plan.
Right.
What's different about the normal tax planning that people do versus what you're talking about it with a strategy?
Yeah. So typically, tax planning is looking at this year versus next year. So, should I incur this expense this year or should I defer it to next year? Should I bring in this income this year or should I wait and collect that income until next year? So, it's accelerating or deferring income and expenses is typical tax planning. Tax strategy is taking a much broader look at a multi-year life cycle. And in my case, I'm looking at it for multiple generations. Like, what is the strategy for my family, not just for my lifetime, but for my children's lifetime? And what are the structures we're creating to be tax efficient for generations?
And when people hear that, they can get overwhelmed. They can say, well, I don't know what's going to happen politically in 6 months, let alone what's going to happen in years. So how do I even think that far ahead? I think that you're telling people that they can plan, they
I
can have
think
a
we all
strategy.
plan, and then reality hits, and reality's never what the plan was. And 99% of cases, everything that I try and do is slower than I want it to be, and it's less successful than I want it to be. It's been an outlier where I've had more success faster than I thought. But it doesn't mean that I don't have a plan. And then, like any strategy, business strategy or tax strategy, you update it and you evolve it over time as you see your actual results. But I think it's going in, from the start when you form a business. The first thing about your tax strategy is what type of business. And again, I'm a US taxpayer and I kind of focus on US taxes. It's different in Canada, it's different in England, it's different around the world. But in the US, there's two basic ways to form a company. One is everything's going to pass through to you personally, and the other is the company's going to pay its own tax. And that one decision is like a huge decision that so many entrepreneurs just ask their accountant, and the accountant tells them one way or the other without much explanation or consideration of what the pros and cons are.
And that's like the difference between a C corp, which is the company
Right.
pays all the taxes, and an LLC where the
Correct.
individual pays the taxes, the owner pays the taxes.
Yeah.
And you know so what you're really saying is a tax strategy starts on forming the company. Now, what if you've already got a company and it's a C corp or an LLC, and you're sort of already in process? Because one of the things that I think a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs think about, a lot of homeowners think about, a lot of people who end up accumulating any assets over time think about is they only think about taxes when it comes time to pay them. And I
Right.
think then you're saying, okay, how do I minimize my tax burden? How do I become more efficient with it? But you're saying that that's maybe not the best way to do it. And you're saying it's definitely not the right way to do it. But having a
Yeah.
strategy from inception, from the when you start making money, makes more sense.
It definitely makes more sense. And again, most people think about things that are important to them at a certain time. And taxes isn't really ever on their list until they're going to pay their tax bill or they're going to their accountant's office. And I think the message I want to send to your audience is that you're doing a disservice to yourself and your family if those are the only times you're thinking about it. And I'll give you just a numeric example. So if we double a dollar 5 times tax-free, we go from $1 to $2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, 16 to 32. Everybody kind of gets that math. Well, what happens if instead of no taxes, we just have to pay 25%? So our dollar, instead of becoming 2, it becomes $1.75. If we do that 5 times, instead of $32, we have $16. So a 25% tax can take away more than half of your wealth as it compounds, because you're losing the opportunity cost on all those dollars that go to the government. So
that's huge. So let's talk about it qualitatively. That's a quantitative observation, right? That's a real dollars and cents. And, a lot of people get linear growth, and exponential growth is really hard to understand. But let's talk about, obviously you can't talk about people and places in specificity, but give me what changes for people, for the entrepreneur, for the difference maker, for the person who's doing it, when they have a strategy versus when they don't. What changed for you? Like, what do you
yeah,
think was better about your life? How did things
I
change
just
for
had way
you?
more cash flow. So I've been a real estate professional since the turn of the century. And one of the great benefits that being a real estate professional has meant for my situation is that I really haven't paid a lot of income tax in the last 24 years. So all of the money I've been generating, I'm keeping. I'm not handing it over to the government. And, frankly, it's probably millions of dollars that are in my coffers versus the government's. And I'd rather have it, and that's not to say that I want it because I just want to spend it all on myself and my family. I like to do good things with it, and things that, I'm sure the government might do some good things with it too, but I'd rather decide how I'm going to utilize those dollars than the federal government.
And by doing it that way, being strategic about it from day one, you've had the benefit of using those funds to compound, to build more wealth, to build more influence, to build more. And by influence, I don't mean societal influence. I mean influence your own outcomes, right?
Correct.
That
And
we talked
hire
about.
more people, and, buy more real estate and house more families that need homes, and, all of those impacts that we make along the way in our business or our financial life.
Yeah. So to you, I think behind you it says build your legacy, right? And for you, legacy um, means what? What does that mean to you?
So for me, it's really expressing your higher purpose while you're here on earth, and finding ways that you can have an impact on others so that they can have some takeaway from what you've brought to this planet while you were here. And I really focus on what I call a living legacy. Like, how do I contribute now while I'm here? I'd say that I found that, there's really 3 core areas that people develop meaning and purpose in their life outside their business. And especially for entrepreneurs that have sold their companies, the greatest challenge they face is recreating that meaning and purpose through something new. The first is really in sharing your experience. So whether it's interviewing people on a podcast, or writing books, or being a public speaker, or coaching and mentoring, I find that, a lot of people, myself included, I've gone out and been a speaker. I've written a bunch of books. Actually, I have a new book coming out called Exit Rich Beyond Money. I really enjoy the process of sharing with others things that I've learned. It makes me feel good. A second thing is focusing on your family. So, we call that family bonding, and being really intentional for me about my role as a parent and a husband and a child, and trying to find ways that I can influence the people that are closest to me in having a better life. And then the third way is really in supporting noble causes. And those could be nonprofits, they could be for profits. I would say my cause is really supporting entrepreneurs. I find that entrepreneurs in general tend to, people think of them as being self-sufficient because they're creators, but really we need a community. We need people that can assist us and help us. And, you and I are both part of EO, which is such a wonderful organization to support entrepreneurs. And I've just felt like that's really my passion. Those are the people that I care about most, because I feel like if I can help change the life of an entrepreneur, I'm really changing the life of many more people that go beyond them, whether it's their employees or their vendors or their customers. I'm really, that change gets amplified through the entrepreneur.
Yeah, I like this idea of living legacy, and I like how we came from talking about a tax strategy to being able to build and live your legacy, or create a living legacy. Do, do you think that you've seen people um, unable to 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 live their legacy because of not having a tax strategy? I mean, is that has it stood in the way
It's
of
a
that?
difficult tie in there. I would say it's more about uh, financial freedom. So typically, I see entrepreneurs are more focused on their business when they've got to get by. They're working their 80-hour weeks. They're just like pouring their heart and soul into trying to get their business to work. They don't necessarily have time to make an impact outside of their company. Maybe yes, with their family, maybe yes, with some nonprofits, maybe yes, with some experience sharing that they do in one way or another. But I think when I'm in a room, like I have a philanthropic mentor who, sends over 100 kids to college every year. And he needed the space in his life to pursue that pleasure, which required him to kind of leave his operating business to then focus on this cause that he was passionate about. And so, if you don't have that financial independence, then it's hard to get time freedom. And when you don't have time freedom, it's hard to dedicate your life to helping others.
Yeah, so this idea of getting by, right? If people aren't getting by, they don't have freedom. And one of the things that can stop people from getting by is really having a sound financial strategy around how you're not just treading water, how you're not just paying for the bills today, but you set things up in a way that could sustain you for the long term, right? And I think that's really important. And I love your three pillars of sharing your experience, focus on family, supporting noble causes. Do you think that there have been times when even you, who from a pre-college days, you said you learned that the lesson about the real estate entrepreneurs and real estate investors that were smart with tax strategy, have there been times when you got away from it, that you maybe missed a step?
I've always been focused on tax strategy, never missed that step. I would say there are times in my life where I was more devoted to what I thought would be noble causes. And there was a time where I was retired. I didn't have an operating business. And my intention was to dedicate my life to causes that I cared about. And I was volunteering my time and I wasn't feeling fulfilled. And so it was really an evolution of my own personal journey, recognizing that sitting in a boardroom with 17 other people to talk about, impacting homelessness in my area, I really wasn't making as much of a difference as I thought I could if I would hone my efforts and maybe be able to write a bigger check by going back to work and helping entrepreneurs who are really the people I cared about, but they didn't need my charity, and like kind of reverse engineering how I was going to have the biggest impact.
One of the things that I think is really impressive and empowering here also is that some people think, and what I hear a lot is, I'm in tech, I'm in, I'm a CPA, I'm a this, I'm a that, right? And I can't make a difference in my career. And you're saying, no, 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 I made a bigger difference by being really good at my career and then applying the benefits of that to my three pillars. Am I hearing you right?
Yeah. And so we just got an email. We send a couple of kids to college. I mentioned my philanthropic mentor sends over 100 kids to college. and, you know, getting an email from one of the kids that we provided a 4-year scholarship to, and hey, I'm back at, I don't know that I would have had the financial confidence to do that had I maintained my retirement lifestyle. But now that I'm back at work, I have more confidence to do those types of things. And so I think my life is richer and more fulfilling, uh, despite kind of being back at work versus having a life of leisure.
Yeah, Jeff Hoffman, who was a Paper Napkin Wisdom contributor in the past, said use your career to make a difference in the world.
Yeah.
And he talked about a similar story where he had an exit, and he was sitting there watching the news, and he saw a shelter, a homeless shelter, needed support. He said somebody should help them. He was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm somebody, I can help them. And he found a way to always incorporate that into his life. And it sounds like that's an intentional part of what's brought you back to work,
Yeah.
right? And that's part of your strategy. Also, it's part of the benefit of your strategy that you can do these things. You can use your career to make a difference. Um, that's really powerful. So there was a time when you got too focused or more focused on noble causes, which interestingly diminished your ability to be able to support them
Right.
in your view. Would you say that there's a tool that you to stay, how do you keep yourself in balance between in your career, in your profession, building business, operating business as you called it, and and your three pillars? How do you manage that energy?
So I use a philosophy called an ideal week. And inside of an ideal week, you know, really what uh, I've done for myself is I've thought about what's the future I want to create. And if I want to reverse engineer that future, how do I bring that into life now? So I've got school age children. My son's a senior in high school. My daughter's an eighth grader. And my wife and I would really like to be traveling the world full time, but that's not conducive to raising the family that we have. And so we spend the summers traveling because that's when we can get on the road. And interestingly, my son, when he graduates high school and hopefully he goes off to college, our daughter will be a freshman. She's decided she'll travel the world with us. So we're going to homeschool her for a year and we're going to travel around the world. So we're trying to bring that future into the present. Uh, and I look at my calendar on a weekly basis. So my Wednesdays I spend with my wife until 3 p.m. I have a management team, my L10 meeting. You know, we run on EOS. I have a 3 o'clock management team meeting. That's my only meeting on Wednesday. And between the time we drop our daughter at school and 3 o'clock, we like to go for a walk. We go to the beach. We go out to lunch. On Fridays, that's the day I take to myself. And so usually on Friday, I'm seeing friends or I'm running errands that aren't necessarily errands I'd run with my kids on the weekends. And then I work Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, and Saturday and Sunday are my family days. And so, you know, that wasn't created by accident. That was created with a lot of intention. And, you know, again, I had the benefit of not having any operating business requirements, and I had 5 days of leisure. It really wasn't as rewarding as now having this balance and finding a mechanism. So for me, I'm working 3 days a week, about 40 weeks a year. The other 12 weeks, I'm off all week. And the 40 weeks that I'm working, I'm usually off Wednesdays and Fridays. And so that's the balance I've found works for me now. And, you know, I think as my kids age, that's going to change.
So I love this idea of creating an ideal week. What's the future that you want to create, pulling it into the present, creating time blocks to be able to support that. Are there seasons to your time blocks? Meaning, do you change those time blocks? You change that
Yeah.
schedule based on the season? I mean, as a CPA, do you have a tax season that you have to
No,
change that
I
schedule
don't
to
have
anymore?
I don't have a busy season. I have summer. You know, I have when the kids are in school and when the kids are out of school. So I made a commitment a number of years ago before I retired that I only wanted to work on school days. And that came as a result of, you know, kind of the origin story was I was taking the kids on a 2 week vacation in the summer. And I like to play this game where I buy a lottery ticket and I think about what would change if I won. And so as I was sitting there, like, okay, so we win $300 million. What am I doing this summer? I'm not going to take 2 weeks off. I'm taking the whole summer off. And, you know, I'm taking Martin Luther King Day off, and I'm taking President's Day off, and I'm going to be with the kids. And so I kind of made a commitment then that I only wanted to work on school days. So I was 180 days a year that the kids are in school. Those are my days to work. And then, again, I was retired, but now that I'm back in the office, that's kind of the same philosophy. So when the kids are off, I'm off.
I love this lottery ticket idea, right? Buy a lottery ticket, mostly to imagine what would change about your life. And again, this helps you with what's the future you want to create and pull it in. What could you do now? Right. And does that mean, okay, look, if you won the lottery ticket, you might do a different type of trip than one that's within your budget
Right.
today, right? It might be a little bit different. Maybe there's a private jet involved. Maybe there's something else involved. Maybe there's some extra splurge involved that wouldn't be part of today. But I think that by pulling that future in, you can start to live that way in a reasonable way. And how has that impacted the rest of your life?
Well, I'd say there's 4 questions that one can ask themselves when they buy that lottery ticket. And it's, who are the people I'd spend more time with? And who are the people I'd spend less time with? And what are the things that I'd start doing? And what are the things that I'd stop doing? And every time I ask myself those questions when I buy those lottery tickets, I come to the stark realization that that is not about money. Those are, it's really about making thoughtful decisions on how I'm going to spend my time. And it really is encouraging me to have courage to make the changes needed to make those answers come to fruition. I don't need to win the lottery to spend Wednesdays at the beach with my wife. I needed to come up with a strategy for how was I going to free up that time so that she and I could be together.
And isn't that the core of your napkin, right? I mean, your tax strategy is this tax is this lagging thing that comes at the end of everything, right? So strategize for it now so you get it later. You deal with it later better than if you just deal with it when it comes. I think that's a philosophy that you're applying everywhere in your life. What does the end look like,
Right.
and what can I pull into it now?
Well,
What do I
I'm
want
a
that to look
planner
like?
by vocation, right? So I love planning. I've been planning ever since I was a little kid. And so I made it my job to do planning, and I plan for others, and I get a lot of joy out of planning. It's kind of a cute thing. My wife and I, every week, we produce our menu. It's on the refrigerator, is the menu for the week, and it's like, it's kind of a comical thing about our relationship that this is what's on the menu for the week. Like it's written, it's in advance, it's typed, it's printed, every Sunday. And it's
And it
very
gives you
unusual.
joy. You like that. You like that predictability, right? You like
I
being able to
think
see that.
the discipline gives me freedom.
Yeah, structure sets you free, and that's one of the things we talk about a lot. I think that there's a lot that we covered in this paper napkin that was um, I thought we might, but then there's some really great surprises. Noah, thank you for joining me today.
With pleasure.